Hi everybody, welcome to Visions of Foundation. My name is Manoj Swaminathan, and today I am going to talk about a very important topic, and that is pharmacovigilance training. Now, let me make one thing very clear that I'm not going to talk about a pharmacovigilance training course or a certification course or something. I'm talking about the pharmacovigilance training requirements in a pharmaceutical company or a marketing authorization holder. Okay, let's get started. So, what do the regulations state? All personnel involved in the performance of pharmacovigilance activities shall receive initial and continued training. It is very important to understand each of these terms. Performance of pharmacovigilance activities. That doesn't mean it is only for the pharmacovigilance department, right? So when you talk about pharmacovigilance, it is about adverse events, right? And it is possible that any department in the company can receive an adverse event. So that means for the performance of pharmacovigilance activities, all departments need to work together, right? So this is something you should remember. And the second important part is initial and continued training. Now, pharmacovigilance is somewhat volatile as well, and that is why it is recommended that you undertake refresher courses, if possible, annually, especially for the other departments. So, it is initial and continued training. And why continued is also because the regulations keep on evolving, and many countries come up with regulations as well. So, that is why it should be initial and continued training. Let me tell you one thing, that this is one of the most favorite areas for the regulatory inspectors. So when they come for inspections, they would certainly look into the pharmacovigilance training aspects in the company. They would look into the pharmacovigilance training for the pharmacovigilance department as well as for the allied functions. So this is a very important area, both in case of audits, probably an external audit, as well as a pharmacovigilance regulatory inspection. Okay. Company staff training. So when you say company staff training, it should be all departments. So there is no exclusion out here, and it should also include the security personnel, the receptionist or the administration department personnel, as well as the contractors. Now, the contractors are not going to be permanent, right? So they would have a fixed term, but still you need to train them because they can also come across an adverse event with the company product. So please remember that even if it's a short term contractor, you should ensure that the person is trained on the pharmacovigilance policies in the company. Okay. And apart from this, the other department personnel, when you say, it should be all department, as I said. Uh, but I would stress upon the regulatory affairs department, quality, marketing, and so on. Now, let us talk about the pharmacovigilance department personnel training. As I told you, pharmacovigilance is ever evolving and to some extent volatile as well. As a result, you should ensure that the department personnel are trained on a continuous basis. This includes everything related to the company policies, the departmental SOPs, uh, the evolving pharmacovigilance guidelines or regulations, and also refresher trainings. So everything should be involved or included in the department personnel training. So here are few questions. What training should the head receive? So if you have the head of global pharmacovigilance, what training should he or she receive? Right? What training should the QPPV receive? What training should the new joiners receive? So all these questions should be ready in case of an, or all these answers should be ready during an inspection. Now, training should the head of pharmacovigilance receive? It should be everything, right? Because that person is going to be in charge of all the activities. So it is essential that this person is aware about everything. I would, yes, they don't need to understand the minor intricacies, but still they should know what is going on in the department. QPPV, because I'm talking about the qualified person for pharmacovigilance, this can be regional, local, or even global level. So QPPV should receive trainings because they should be aware about the ever changing regulations. They should know what is going on now or what is required at this moment by any regulatory agency, right, that they are involved with. So that is something which we should always remember. Then if there is a new joiner and say in pharmacovigilance, what should they know or what should they learn about, or else if it is another department, what should they learn about pharmacovigilance. So everything should be pre-planned and documented in advance. This also applies to the uh, contractual staff in the pharmacovigilance department. So that is something you should always remember. The training should always relate to the roles and responsibilities of the personnel. For example, if somebody is involved in medical writing, so you may not pay so much importance on the medical information training, right? So because this person is involved in medical writing, so that is something you should look into. So this varies. If somebody is involved in risk management, again, you don't need to train them on case processing, and it goes on like that. Now, the previous slide I asked some questions, right? Which training should who receive, right? So for all this, there is only one answer, and that is having a training plan and matrix. Now, if in case of an audit or inspection, if the inspector or the auditor asks you that how do you decide what training would a new joiner receive, or what training would the head receive, or somebody from the department receive, you should say that we have a training matrix in place, and based on that we decide what trainings would the said person receive. So that is very, very, very important. Okay. But what does this entail, right? What does a training plan entail, and what does a training matrix entail? I'll be explaining that to you. So this is an example, okay? A sample training matrix. So on the left, you can see a column with the designations, and on the right or horizontally, you can see the columns that talk about the various SOPs and various aspects in pharmacovigilance. Also, it talks about PSMF, SDA training. So this is just an indicative list, not a comprehensive list, uh, just for your understanding. For example, if you're talking about QPPV, so there is a tick against all these processes. So a QPPV needs to know everything. Head of pharmacovigilance, again, you can see that there is a tick against everything. Now, if you talk about a medical writer doesn't need to know about PSMF or a safety data exchange agreement, right? So that is why there is a cross. Then if it is say pharmacovigilance quality, so there is a cross against everything because they are not required to know about these things. Although in case of audit or else while managing the system, they need to know some basic stuff. But then whenever I say it's a cross, it should be considered optional. So if somebody says that yes, I still want to learn, then there should be a provision that they should be able to learn something extra. Okay. So this way you need to create a training matrix for the entire department, and it should be duly signed off. And as and when you update it, it should be version controlled, and again it should be signed off. So you should maintain all the old versions as well. So training matrix is extremely important, not only in pharmacovigilance but even other departments as well. Okay. Now professional development plan. Okay, this is something which very few companies follow, and it is a good practice, but although not mandatory, where you can have a professional departmental plan for the QPPV or the department personnel, that how their role will evolve or how their knowledge will evolve over time, right? So what all new things they can learn. I'll give an example that okay, you have an employee who is in the department for the last 2 or 3 years, and you don't want this person to leave, right? And what you can do is you can prepare a professional development plan or a PDP, where this person can attend conferences, events, external trainings, and so on. So you can create such a stuff wherein this person also feels happy that okay, as per my plan, I'll be attending a conference this year or say next year, or I'll be able to attend an external training at so and so point in time, and also what all new things I'm going to learn, right? The role will also keep evolving. For example, somebody is a case processor for long, and this person wants to learn medical writing, then even that can be included out here. So it really works well. Then training effectiveness. This is something very, very important, that whenever you train somebody, you also need to understand whether that person has understood, right? Same thing even applies to the SOPs. So is it read only or understood also, right? So that is why you should understand whether the training has been effective. And how do you do that? By having an assessment or an evaluation. Even if it is MCQ, that is okay. Or multiple choice questions, I meant. So even that should be okay. But then it is advisable to undertake effectiveness assessment. Uh, so this also applies to the other department personnel or the general pharmacovigilance training for the company personnel. Again, you can train them and also assess whether they have understood something. If in case they don't clear, then they can have one more attempt, and you can define in your training policy that 2 attempts or 3 attempts. If not, then you retrain them and then again undertake the assessment. So you can always consider all these activities. Apart from this, the business partner or distributors. So even these personnel need to be trained on the company's pharmacovigilance policies. Now, a distributor or a business partner would work on behalf of the pharma company or the marketing authorization holder. So that is why they need to know, right? So this even can be a product based training, or it can be related to only the safety aspects, the timelines, sometimes even the training on the agreement between the two entities. So these things should be covered. And again, it is advisable to have refresher trainings. And if somebody leaves from their company, then the new person should also get trained. So it should be on a real time basis, and everybody should know about the pharmacovigilance requirements and trained on the company policies. So that is something you need to understand. Then the local responsible person, right? So QPPV, or say pharmacovigilance officer in charge, or the local responsible person. So these people also need to be trained on pharmacovigilance. Even if a company has outsourced pharmacovigilance or they have an external contractor, they should still get trained. So this is one area where companies make a mistake. They don't consider the external resources in their training matrix. So this is very, very important. Even if I'll give an example, say Belgium, you decided to have a contractor, local QPPV in Belgium, and also you pay them and everything, and you have a contract and so on. However, you don't know whether they are current with their regulatory requirements, right? So that is where you need to include them in your training matrix, and also ensure that they are continuously trained. They can even attend events, and at times you can even have the QPPV training them. For the example of Belgium itself, you can have the EU QPPV training them on pharmacovigilance on a periodic basis. So even that helps. Apart from this, please remember that the pharmacovigilance requirements are gradually evolving. Right? So it's a never-ending story, and the requirements keep on changing with time. So that is why it is essential that the people are trained on a periodic basis, and this should even be included in your regulatory intelligence, where you keep on evaluating whether anything has changed. So if any new regulation comes up or something gets changed, again you need to train your people on a regular basis. So very important aspect. Now here are some recommendations regarding pharmacovigilance training. First and foremost, you should have a policy for pharmacovigilance and induction training, where you should decide on what all aspects should be covered. Some examples include day zero, 4 minimum criteria, pregnancy reporting, follow up, the timelines for reporting, and also the awareness about other pharmacovigilance principles. You can also give them some idea about the history of pharmacovigilance. So this is primarily about the non-pharmacovigilance department personnel. But if it comes to the pharmacovigilance department personnel, then the induction training should also include the SOPs, the pharmacovigilance policies, then also the regulations, then even hands-on training on the safety database, say aggregate safety reporting, risk management, and so on. Then please note that it's advisable to have assessment so that you understand that somebody who has recently joined has also understood what they have learned, right? So this even applies to the existing personnel. So whenever you undertake a SOP refresher training, please ensure that there is an assessment and you document it and sign it off appropriately. Training records, very important. These are generally under the purview of inspections and audit. So ensure that if anybody has got trained on something, then it is appropriately recorded. If you can do it on a real-time basis, that will be advised, right? What we call as contemporaneous, right? In the data integrity principles. So if you do it on a real-time basis, that will be useful. You can do it on paper, or you can even do it using electronic document systems, right? Electronic signatures and so on. You can do that. But please try to do it on a real-time basis. Not that, okay, today you train and after 3 days you take these signatures. That is not really recommended. Then it is advisable to have a pharmacovigilance training budget, right? So what plans you have over the next 1 year, and what expenses you may incur. For example, you need to send 2 or 3 people to an external conference. So you can decide on a training budget. The same thing even applies to the external trainers for the department, right? So all this, it is advisable that you have a training budget. So this can even include the organization-wide training, right? You can have a training budget and you can ensure that all your personnel are trained on pharmacovigilance. Then internal and external trainings. So you can have internal trainings which can talk about SOPs and also the internal processes. At times you can even get an external contract trainer who can give more idea or perspectives on pharmacovigilance. These can even be people who can train on inspection and audit readiness, or these can be auditors who can give information or say train the people on pharmacovigilance, so and even the quality management system. So it is essential that you should not only consider internal but also external. Now if in case you decide to send someone from your department for an external training, what you can do is once the person is back, they should train the entire team on what they have learned, right? Say you can fix up a timeline that within 7 calendar days they would train the entire team on what they have learned. So with this, what advantage you get is that everybody learns new things, right? So that's an advantage. And while training, the person who attended will also retain more, right? So when you teach someone, you tend to retain more. Then conferences. So it is advisable, but then there should be some motive as well, that people should attend with the motive of learning something new. So this is very, very important. Again, you can be quite choosy that which conference you want to send people to, and where there is more probability to learn something. And sometimes it may be focused conferences, for example risk minimization, or risk management, or say advanced automation. So you can consider this the theme of the conference, and based on that you can send your people for the training. Then training effectiveness, as I told, that it is advisable to have training effectiveness assessment, where you can evaluate whether people retain what they have learned. Right? You can even have such effectiveness trainings, or say effectiveness assessment at the end of the calendar year. You can even do that. You can aggregate everything and you can check whether your people know everything. Right? And based on that, you can take some actions as well. And finally, it is advisable to have annual plans in place. That if you had an annual plan for last year, and what is the status now, right? At the end of the year, you can sign off. And what was the status? That say 25 trainings were planned, and out of that only 22 were completed, 3 were not completed. What was the reason, right? So you document everything appropriately and then sign it off. That is most important. And you can even plan what you want to do next year. In say by November or December, you can decide what you want to do in the next calendar year, which all trainings need to be conducted, and also which all workshops or say external trainings need to be evaluated. So all these things you can enlist, and you can sign off the annual training plan. So this is again a very important recommendation and advisable to pursue. So pharmacovigilance regulations are continuously or constantly evolving, right? And that is why people need to learn what new things are happening, and also be aware of their processes. And as I told you, pharmacovigilance is quite volatile, and if you are not practicing, you may tend to forget something. So that is why you need to ensure that people are trained at all times. I hope you found this session to be useful. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, comments, or even suggestions. Thank you. Stay safe. Bye.